we're digging into the controversial U.S. pandemic provision that allows for fast-track deportation at the border over COVID-19 concerns, and that might actually come to an end soon. Here is what White House Press Secretary Jen Psaki recently said about it. Take a listen.
I think it's important to remember that Title 42 is not an immigration policy or an immigration authority. It's a health authority. We are continuing to prepare to implement the lifting of Title 42, a decision that was made by the CDC. I would note that there are a range of views on Title 42. There are some, you noted, who are very vocal about how they would like to see it extended. There are some who are very vocal about how they would not like to see that happen.
Jen Psaki there talking about Title 42. Now let's break down a few of the numbers and the data behind Title 42 for our By the Numbers this morning. So it's estimated that 1.7 million migrants, including asylum seekers, have been expelled via Title 42. That's according to the American Immigration Council. Now, the Biden administration wants to get rid of it as soon as this month. But the Department of Homeland Security is arguing that the end of the policy could trigger a surge of as many as 18,000 people per day at the border. So joining me now in studio to talk more about this with us is Bloomberg News reporter Madison Muller. She is here in New York with us. Madison, you've been covering Title 42 and this issue really for quite some time now. Maybe just take a step back for us and tell us what Title 42 is and why there's so much controversy surrounding it at this point in time.
Yeah, so at the beginning of the pandemic, under the Trump administration, this is part of a Public Health Service Act. So this is supposed to be for public health. It's been used before. It was put in place in March 2020 at the beginning of the pandemic, early days of the pandemic, like I said, under the Trump administration. And it was meant to help curb border crossings as a means of helping with COVID transmission. So to slow the spread, to help with transmission in border facilities. But, kind of since the beginning, public health officials have said, immigration really isn't contributing to the spread of COVID. This is not something that a lot of physicians supported. There were several public letters from, former public health officials and current physicians that immediately kind of came out against this and said this is not something that we should be doing. But since then, the outcry around this has definitely gotten a lot louder.
Yeah, and I think everybody remembers we were just talking about last year when those migrants were seen sort of being chased by Border Patrol agents on horse. I'm trying to understand sort of why it's still been in place this long now. You mentioned it started under the Trump administration. Why are we still talking about this today?
Right. I think that was something that a lot of people were surprised by. Biden had said that he was going to reform the American immigration system and make it more humane. And a lot of people were expecting Title 42 to be repealed and to not be a thing anymore when he took office. But it's continued. I mean, in March 2022, so literally 2 months ago now, we're in May, there were more than half of the encounters at the border were under Title 42. So more than half of the border encounters were people being expelled under Title 42. So it really, has continued to be a part of immigration in our country since Biden took office, and they review it every couple of months, and it's continued since he took office.
And can you explain, Madison, sort of the concerns about lifting it at this point in time? I mean, we mentioned that 18,000 number. Is it just the influx of migrants that is the biggest concern, or is there something else here that you're researching?
Yeah, I mean, I think that there's a lot of humanitarian concerns. The fact that, part of the issue is that people, lawmakers on both sides of the aisle are concerned that there are just so many people on the other side of the border waiting to come in, and that can cause health problems, humanitarian issues. In 2019, the recidivism rate, so the number of people that were encountered more than once at the border by CBP, was 7%. That was in 2019, so prior to the pandemic. And now it's at 27%. So that the number of people that are trying to come across has skyrocketed in terms of people that are trying again, because the issue with Title 42 is people aren't necessarily returned to their home country in a traditional, deportation. A lot of times they're just put on the other side of the border in the southwestern border, the southern border with Mexico, and no matter if they're from there or not. So people are just kind of waiting, hoping for Title 42 to lift, and that's the concern with, there are just a lot of people that are desperate, wanting to come into the country, and we don't necessarily have the public health infrastructure right now or means of controlling this from an immigration standpoint. And so there's a lot of concerns there.
So there's no real indication that actually keeping Title 42 in place sort of is doing what it was intended to do, essentially?
Yeah, I mean, because there's been, physicians, public health officials have said there's no real evidence that, I guess, that immigrants are the ones that are spreading COVID, and our travel has continued. Borders are back open and to travelers, vaccinated or not, and so there's a little bit of confusion there, I think, too.
And just finally, Madison, Jen Psaki mentioned at the top that this was a CDC policy put in place. Is there anything the CDC can do at this point in time? Are we hearing anything from agencies? Because you're sort of covering from the pandemic perspective. What are we hearing from them?
Right. Well, I think there's not a lot that we're hearing. And, initially, I think that is the confusion, is this is something that is under the CDC's authority. But a lot of the communication around this is about immigration and is, coming from DHS or from the White House. And so I think that's definitely causing some confusion, is what is the public health implications and the public health standpoint on this.
Yeah, especially when you think about we're in a midterm year, a lot of people using that for their own talking points. All right.